Our next speaker, who fundamentally, along with Pat McNamara, authored this report that is effectively a call to action and fundamentally sets out some very critical agendas that we are looking towards. The Hon Steve Bracks was elected the 44th Premier of Victoria in 1999 and was one of the state's longest serving Premiers. He is chairman of the superannuation fund CBUS and holds 3 major honorary positions as an advisor to the Prime Minister of Timor-Leste and as director of the Bionics Institute of the Australia Board. He is also the honorary chair of the Union of Education Foundation. Steve, come up, Steve.
Well, thank you very much, Martin, and to the Regional Development Minister, Jala Pulford's Chief of Staff, to Steph Ryan, the Shadow Minister for Regional Development, and my former parliamentary colleague, Pat McNamara. We served in the Parliament together some time ago. Today I'm going to speak about 2 key points we raised in our discussion paper. First, the integration of transport land use planning, and second, the private sector taking up a role in supporting a decentralisation program. As you all know, Victoria's population is booming, and with our economy is growing the fastest pace of any state in the nation. But before we involve ourselves in a debate about whether population growth is something we can control in its entirety, let's pause to think about what is happening globally. We live in the fastest growing region of the world at a time when population growth is faster than any other stage of human existence. China has about 56 times more people than Australia, while India is forecast to have more babies born this year than our entire population. That is about 27 million babies born. By 2050, 10 of the 32 largest economies in the world will be in our region. Our neighbours will include 5 of the world's 12 most populous nations. The Brookings Institute tells us that by 2025, another 1 billion people will enter the global middle class. 90% of them will be nations in our region. This new affluence will bring a desire for more than Australia's resources or access to our universities. It will continue to drive immigration in record numbers. The growth is a real opportunity for our state and also for our nation if we plan for and manage it effectively. Tackling the trifecta of housing affordability, jobs productivity and mobility is where a targeted and structured decentralisation program can make a real and lasting difference. But to be effective, any decentralisation program needs to be built on best transport connectivity available. The innovation of high-speed rail, with speeds of up to 300 kilometres per hour, can induce a transformation of the settlement pattern around the City of Melbourne and regional Victoria. This virtual cycle of transport-oriented development that we have witnessed in Melbourne, and we've witnessed it, of course, with the now being constructed Melbourne Metro, with rail crossing removal, with regional rail link, can be applied in a new way for a structured decentralisation program for Victoria. The benefit of integrating long-term land use, zoning density, urban built form and housing types with the introduction of high-speed rail is immense. Such integration can allow for settlements to be planned around the railhead and central commercial areas, and for social infrastructure such as schools, hospitals and universities to be planned. New cities supported by decentralisation would be designed to leverage the benefits of new smart city sustainability and transport technologies as they become available. They can be seized to provide thriving and viable local economies, while at the same time functioning through fast rail connectivity as part of Melbourne's greater metropolitan economy. The long-term impacts for our state are real and important. Globally, cities are no longer competing for the best in human, cultural, technical and financial capital. Instead, it is regions or mega-regions that are the hubs of economic growth worldwide. Just 40 of these mega-regions account for roughly 2/3 of the world's economic output and more than 85% of its innovation, while housing just 18% of its population. A decentralisation program for our state can develop a Victoria super region that offers a single jobs market and agglomeration economic base that can compete with the major centres and major mega regions in the Asia Pacific. Victoria, the nation's most densely populated state, is well poised to establish such a regional economic community using rapid mass transport and transit as its foundation for agglomeration or financial and human capital. And the private sector can bring its capital and expertise to the effort, and in fact it needs to do so. A quick look into the funding mix for infrastructure in Australia shows that we need to find more ways to include private capital in our investment program. In most developed economies, 40% of infrastructure is funded by governments, with the private sector funding about 55%. With regards to our funding mix, Australian infrastructure is funded in aggregate 44% by the private investment, compared to 55% on our OECD counterparts. Looking into the private and government fixed capital formation data from the ABS national accounts, we can see there's a divergence across sectors. The private sector is heavily involved in ICT investment, providing about 64% of the investment, but is well below OECD benchmarks in transport at about 38% and utilities at only 35% of investment. A planned long-term decentralisation program in Victoria can bring the private sector into the game in a more substantive manner. A planned decentralisation program will bring with it a need to build new and upgraded existing transport infrastructure, a need for new social infrastructure in education, health, justice, sports, a need for upgraded IT and telecommunications infrastructure, an opportunity to invest in the latest technology, latest energy generation, distribution, as well as waste management, and the construction of new built environments to house populations and businesses in new high-growth regional cities. Such a program would represent a pipeline of multifaceted infrastructure and construction programs which would span across about 30 years. Such certainty over a long period can allow for instruments to be developed that facilitate greater private participation in the funding mix. The funding is available if the approaches to attract investment are right. Australia's superannuation assets, for example, total $2.6 trillion at the end of March 2018. And internationally, the OECD estimates that as of 2013, the funds managed by institutional investors in OECD countries amounted to nearly $100 trillion. The private sector can, when given ownership of projects, deliver valuable outcomes. A privately partnered program could deliver cost savings in infrastructure delivery, value for money, with more private capital being employed to fund infrastructure costs in part or in full, efficient management, private operation of the program saves government from adding public service for coordination and delivery of programs. Quality of outcomes, the private sector can and will employ the best and innovative approaches to the program. Some measures need considering that can be incorporated to attract private capital. They include, but are not limited to, long-term loans for governments to projects, bundling or grouping many infrastructure projects into a single asset-backed security or fund that can receive investment, public-private partnerships, refinancing of infrastructure assets by governments once they enter the operational stage, and incentivising retirees to take super as an income rather than a lump sum, which would enable more investment in illiquid assets and not cash-based assets. After many attempts, we need decentralisation to become the central priority of government in 2018. A real program with bipartisan commitment can see us excel in our long-term planning for the state, to deliver a world-class fast rail system for all Victorians, to build a series of new population centres throughout Victoria, and initiate policies to bring a growing contribution from the best in global private sector expertise and capital investment. The challenge, of course, is substantial, but Victorians are, as ever, equal to it. I wish the discussion paper every success and join in the contribution of having contributions to this debate in the future. Thank you.